Point and click.
Okay. You had a scary time getting here?
Yeah, I just crossed the crosswalk and was slowly moving and did not stop.
Hello. We'll let Kelly grab her food and then we'll start. Yeah. I just wasn't sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I drank your water.
That's okay.
Well, I think you have 2 waters.
Oh, I do. Okay.
Just one more.
Yeah. Winning.
One for each.
Okay, yeah, right. Thank you.
It's interesting that there's a picture of people on their cell phones talking about addiction. I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but in Silicon Valley, the people who are inventing and developing that technology will not let their children use those things.
They also smartphones too, like the amount of radiation that they're giving off. Like it's so much more than we're supposed to be exposed to per day. So yeah, if you can use speakerphone or try and keep it in airplane mode as much as possible, it's also really healthy. Which also helps you not be on your phone.
Yeah, it's in airplane mode. It's hard to check it right.
Yeah.
Well,
That's-
doctors don't, people who develop the pharmaceuticals for vaccinations don't vaccinate their children.
Those are some really bad seeds to be planted, it seems to me.
It is, yeah.
But not only that, in Silicon Valley, they have these nannies that watch after the children. And there's people who spy on the nannies and will call the parents if they see those nannies allowing their children to be on cell phones.
Wow.
It's like that big a deal to them.
Wow.
Okay.
Interesting. That's
So, Katie, do you want to start this when I'm up there, Jay?
Yeah, tell me how to start.
Isn't that crazy?
it's really crazy.
It sort of lets you know that there's something really going on.
So right
Yeah.
now,
If the people who are developing that technology are that zealous about keeping their children away from it.
It's true. Yeah, we're reading what Kelly and it was talking about for developing your child to have a higher IQ. The number one thing that can kill it actually is
Oh, wow.
yeah,
Yeah, so it'll.
especially like the
decide
sex
when I'm gonna
messaging
start.
because they don't develop certain pathways. Interesting. So,
All right, I'm ready.
all
Is this
right.
going?
It is.
Can you edit this?
Yeah, I think so.
Welcome, everybody, to our talk today on peeling off our addictions. Thank you so much for being here. You guys are a very special group that you would be interested during Thanksgiving week, right when we're getting ready to indulge in lots of food and drink and other activities. Peeling off our addictions, you're probably sitting there wondering, why am I here? When we think of addictions, we think often of heroin addictions, alcohol addictions, pills, things that can be really, really damaging to people's lives. And many of us have had those problems or know people who've had those problems, and they're very serious. And we are in no way during this talk trying to replace any kind of professional treatment for addictions. That's not our objective here at all. But the same methods that we're going to be talking about today that will apply to heavy and serious addictions also apply to the small addictions in our lives. And that's what we're really interested in looking at here today, because in the Diamond Cutter series of levels, we're on level 6. And in the beginning, we started more with success, material success, success in relationships, success with your talent, passion, and purpose. Now we're starting to look at in what ways are we blocking our own success? In what ways are we self-sabotaging? So we're starting to get to a little bit more subtle level. So our goal here today, we can't fit in everything about the DCI level 6, peeling off our addictions. So we're just going to try to give you an overview and hopefully a few tools that you can use to start thinking more about your own addictions or where you might want to change. You can call them bad habits. I think that's easier sometimes to wrap our minds around. And some tools that you can start to use, and what it would feel like. So before, all of you are familiar with the diamond cutter system, all of you who came today, so I'll just be brief here. Geshe Michael Roach was a very successful businessman in New York City, and because his business was so successful, Doubleday asked him to write this book, the Diamond Cutter book, and he founded the Diamond Cutter Institute to be able to share these ideas in a business atmosphere and a professional atmosphere with people. The teachings that he put into the Diamond Cutter book and that he shares in the Diamond Cutter Institute come from this, the oldest printed book, which is the Diamond Cutter Sutra, originally spoken by the Buddha 2,500 years ago and used ever since by people to help with success and understanding where their world is coming from. Diamond Cutter Institute reaches 35 cities a year, traveling around the world, and over 30,000 people come to the presentations. If something doesn't make you happy every time, then the happiness isn't coming from it and never was. That's a theme that we're going to be working with today. We are Diamond X speakers. My name is Alex Rowland. This is Katie Fetchenheier and Janice Sanders. And we have done 6 levels of training at the Diamond Cutters teacher training program at Sedona College. We've just finished a 2-week program on this topic in September, and we spent 2 weeks really delving into it. It was very beneficial to us, and we're really happy to be able to share it with you today. The first topic is liberty from addictions. We talked a little bit about addictions can be big or small. What an addiction does is it takes up our time and energy. It takes up our resources. So we're going to start looking at that and defining addiction. But the first thing is to just kind of see where in our lives addictions might be slowing us down or causing problems for us that are keeping us from being as successful as we would like to be and from being the leaders that we would like to be able to be. So what is an addiction? We're going to define that. The first thing, because we all have different ideas of what it is, so this way we can be all talking about the same thing. Compulsive attempts to get pleasure for ourselves. Here's my example. So compulsive means it's a thought that comes up over and over again in your mind. You might be at your desk working and there's a daydream going on about the donuts. Okay, so we're going to use donuts for an example in this first part. Thought about getting donut comes up again and again, and we think that that donut is going to give us pleasure. We can't stop even when we want to. We can't stop the thought from coming up again and again, and we might not be able to even stop ourselves from walking down to the coffee shop to get a donut and a latte. But just having that compulsive behavior and wanting to do it and doing it doesn't necessarily mean it's an addiction. So for our definition, the addiction has to be hurting you in some way. If it's not hurting you or hurting others, then maybe it's a habit, but maybe it's not a habit that's really causing you problems. So these are the 4 things that you can look at as you think about what addictions you have in your life. And hopefully during these first couple of topics that Janice and I are going to be presenting, you're starting to think about where in your life you might have an addiction that you'd like to work on. There's 3 different kinds of addiction that we would like to address. Oh, we already talked about this one. Physical addiction. A lot of things fall in the physical addiction category. And Janice is going to go in depth into all the different ways that that can happen. But in our example of donuts, we talked already about how we might compulsively want to eat donuts again. But how do they hurt us? A donut, an occasional donut might not be a problem, but if we eat donuts regularly, if we eat a dozen donuts at a time, it's going to lead to problems with weight, sugar problems, and we know that there's many diseases in America, especially heart disease, diabetes, that have overeating and weight problems associated with them. So overeating can be a big health problem for ourselves. It can also slow us down, just take our energy down so that we're not as productive during the day. And how does it hurt others? If we're sick, we're not able to help people around us as well, and we can become a weight on society in general. So there's other ways that Janice might go into a little bit more about how some of our physical addictions can hurt others. Sometimes it takes a little extra thought. So the addiction that this girl is depicting here is addiction. That means that we have a habit, a way of thinking repeatedly that we are not in control of. And she's demonstrating negative thinking. I don't really know, but this is a picture to remind us that negative thinking can be a habit. When we start thinking negatively, we start having more negative thoughts, and we become so used to that sensation that it just is something that we're going to repeat again and again, and it's hard to get out of that cycle. The third category is philosophical addiction, and you're going to be thinking, what does that mean? I see Morgan. She's like, I'm ready to write something down.
There was no photos.
I was actually wondering the same thing.
So, what is a philosophical addiction? It's the way we think about things. Are we misunderstanding where things come from? Go to reach for a donut, we're thinking that we're going to get pleasure from that. But is the donut really going to give us pleasure? So there's a misunderstanding in a lot of the ways we achieve for pleasure ahead of ourselves. That's the philosophical addiction. One example is that if we have an overeating problem, we might go and try a lot of different diets. So we're going to try this, we're going to try that, but and to work the Sarah work. So that's our addiction, is misunderstanding. And all of you are experienced Diamond X listeners, so you know that we're going to be helping us understand that, the pen thing. But before we get to the pen thing, we're not going to this edge of the wheel of life. This is an old teaching tool from thousands of years ago, and we're going to be referring to it just a little bit in this talk. If we were doing the whole level, we would go in depth. But it is that there's a scary monster holding the entire wheel. What that means here is our addiction, our unhappiness, and inside the wheel is the whole downward spiral of problems that we cause for ourselves. And addiction is a self-perpetuating downward spiral. And we're going to get more into that later, but I just wanted to introduce this character to our talk. Most important thing is that we can be free of our addictions. And actually, this wheel has a secret spot where we can break the addiction at its source, like a jugular vein. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, the jugular vein. If you cut the jugular vein on a person, they immediately die, and actually there's nothing you can do to stop it. We have paramedics, that true? Jugular. Not jugular. Okay, jugular. Maybe thank you, jugular vein. So we know what it is. Killing point. Thank you for that correction. So there's a place on our wheel of addiction that we can break the cycle, and that's what we're looking to do. If you think about the things that weigh you down, food, drugs, alcohol, all the habits of ways that we think, you think about the way that keeps you from fulfilling your potential. Imagine what it would be like to be free of those things and just to be able to
accomplish what you wanted to do in this world in a happy and joyful way. That's what it'll feel like to be free of addictions. Next up, Janice is going to give us some more details on the 3 different types of addiction.
Thank you, Alex. So, first of all, to understand our addictions, we have to recognize the objects of our addictions. Now, most of you out there might be thinking, I don't have an addiction. I thought that. And then I started studying this course. As Alex said, we just spent 2 full weeks studying what we're trying to present to you in a few hours. So during the course of that study, I realized, oh, I do have addictions. So we've got to, first of all, recognize the objects of our addictions. And that for me, when I thought I didn't have addictions, I pictured the word addiction. And then I thought of addicts. And then I thought of the typical addict, somebody who's strung out on drugs or an alcoholic. And they're so addicted to the substance or the object of their addiction that they've lost their home and they're living in an alley, like maybe next to a big trash can. All around them, there's trash and needles. I mean, that's what came to mind to me when I thought of addictions and addicts. And I thought, I don't have that problem. So this is an important topic. We first have to discover what we might be addicted to so that we can break that habit, so that we can live to our full potential and have success in our lives by freeing up all that mental space and creating a successful business or successful home life. So what might the objects of addictions be? Well, Alex told us that there are 3 basic types: our physical addictions, our emotional addictions, and the mother of them all, our philosophical addictions. Physical addictions are the ones we're most aware of. And the first ones that come to mind for me is, not maybe food, but it is a big problem in America. Food addictions. That's one that maybe you don't think about as being a problem because we hear about people who are starving. But food addictions are a problem. 2 out of 3 Americans are overweight. And if this continues, it's going to affect our health and we're not going to feel good. And when we don't feel good, we're obviously not going to be as successful as we could be. So another addiction is addiction to stimulants. Now, how can that hurt anybody? There's a cup of coffee up there. Maybe I like coffee, maybe I like sugar in my coffee. What's wrong with that? Well, it's a problem. I can tell you a little story. I'm addicted to coffee. I was traveling a couple weeks ago with some people, and I would tell them that I wanted to meet them at 7 a.m. And they I'm angry, and that hurts people. So then another type of addiction is addiction to our cell phones, addiction to our electronic equipment, computers, cell phones, computer data. Got ahead of myself there. Okay, now let's think about the benefits of having computers, of having cell phones. We can communicate with anybody, anywhere in the world. We can get instant information from people all over the world. But the negative side of it is when we're just flipping through while we're at dinner, flipping through and looking at the same messages we've already looked at. Or social media. It can be great or it can be very destructive. I know that we've all heard of stories where kids have been bullied to the point where they commit suicide, or certain groups are attacked with social media. That's not good. And this is the problem with what our electronics have brought. There's good and there's bad. So we have to find a balance. Oftentimes they take this addiction and they hurt, people of all ages. And it's just something that we have to address. So, as we're going along, you can maybe make notes of people or if it affects you. And another one, this one seems obvious, alcohol. I know I've struggled with it from time to time, so I want to know how I can stop my alcohol addiction. And the Diamond Cutter system actually teaches us how we can stop it when we understand where it comes from. Cigarettes. Cigarettes are a terrible addiction. They're responsible for 6 million deaths per year. And 1 million of those deaths come from secondhand smoke. So it's obvious that cigarettes hurt people and hurt others. And alcohol, also, I forgot to mention that alcohol is responsible for 1.2 million auto deaths every year, plus maiming millions of others. So those are obviously bad things that we need to address, and we can do it. Drugs and pills. This is epidemic. prescription drugs. You know, you might think it's harmless, that these things are there to help us. But when people get addicted to opiates or things like that are prescription medicines, they'll do anything to get them. Steal from their friends, steal from their family, just so they can get their needs met. It's a very harmful. I want you to think about something. How many shoes do you have at home in your closet? Okay, are you still thinking, trying to sum up how many pairs of shoes you have in your closet? How many of those shoes still fit you? How many of them are from the last millennium and they're not even in style anymore? Well, we have addiction to our possessions. And if you think about the possessions we have, it's like thinking about the hard drive on a computer. The more gunk you get on your computer, the slower it works. If we apply that same idea to how our mind works, and if we're filling it with all that stupid stuff we have, and when I say that, I'm thinking of the stupid stuff I have an addiction to my possessions. And I'm wondering how much it affects my mind. It clogs it up, just like the extra stuff you have on your computer clogs up your hard drive. And maybe it makes me forgetful because I'm using up my precious mental real estate to keep track of all that garbage I have. And maybe it makes me forgetful. And maybe it's, just progressing that senility that might eventually reach me if I don't start clearing out some of that mental capacity. So those are just some of the more obvious physical addictions we can have. Believe me, there are more. But as we said, we've got just a limited amount of time. And I think you can kind of just think about what your addictions might be. And that brings us to the next type of addiction, which is emotional addictions. Now, these are a little more difficult to find. In fact, you might even think some of them that I present here today, how are those addictions? For instance, busyness. Look at that guy. He's got to have all those arms to manage his life. Now, busyness is an especially dubious addiction because we oftentimes get positive feedback for our good work ethic. But really, when we're so busy that we don't go home when we should so we can spend time nourishing our families, or when we forget that we're so busy and so into our work and the praise we might get from doing a good job, that perhaps we don't drink as much water as we need. Perhaps we even forget to go to the bathroom. These are problems with busyness. It affects our physical health. It puts stress on our heart, stress on our nervous system and our internal organs. It's going to affect everybody. One day, it'll affect you with medical bills. It'll affect those who have to take care of you because you didn't take care of yourself. Now, this is a favorite one of mine. I'm familiar with this. I often use busyness or work. It seems like it's not an addiction. It's a good thing to avoid my family responsibilities. If there's a problem at home that I don't want to face, I'll often choose to find a project at work so I don't have to go home. You see the problems that lie with that? Okay, so then the next one is the attention of others. It's another favorite one of mine. When we're addicted to what people think of us, it hurts us and it hurts them. And my example is I always want people to like me. But my mistake with that is I think they'll like me if I can do something that makes them need me. Well, we all need people. We need coworkers. We need people who help us at the grocery store. We need people. But does that mean we actually have an affection for them? No, we might not even like them, whether we need them or not. So my MO, my motive of operandi, is to want people to need me so they'll like me. But it hurts them and it hurts me because I'm not teaching them something beneficial. I might give them a fish for today and they'll eat for today, but I haven't taught them how to be productive for their life. And that's going to be our goal here when we clean up this messy type of addiction. And the next one is power, addiction to power. You've heard this saying, absolute power corrupts absolutely. Power is an addiction. It can be at work or it can be at home with an overbearing mother, father, brother, sister, somebody who wants to be in control. It hurts them and it hurts you. And the same at work. If you have an overbearing coworker, and they're just making you feel browbeat and beat up, it's negative. And we don't want that kind of, we don't want to affect others that way. And we don't want to experience that from others ourselves. And another one is negativity. Now, Alex touched upon this. we're often addicted to negative thinking. Well, how does that hurt us? Well, it hurts us because we see the world in the dark way. We never look at the silver lining. I like to think like we've been in a drought here in our area. So let's say I have a big company picnic planned and it rains that day and I start complaining and there's more rain. I just don't look at the silver lining that, this rain could be a blessing. It could end the drought. And what happens is I continue with my negative cycle of thinking. I start seeing negative and I create more negativity around me. And when I go and I'm with a great group of people and I walk in, I'm like Deb Downer. I just bring all my baggage with me and bring everybody else down so that nobody has a good time. So how do we know if we have an addiction? There are ways you can find out. Well, first of all, if you don't realize you have an addiction, but you have any little unhappinesses, you might ask a trusted friend or a trusted family member. And believe me, they might be more aware of what your addictions are than you are. For instance, if for myself, I'm at a buffet and I'm going back for my third plate of food, and they notice that I do that every single time and I'm at a buffet and I'm still eating when everyone else is ready to go, they can point that out to me. And it could be very helpful in helping me find what sort of addictions I have. And another way to find out if you have an addiction is to pause. Take a moment and pause when you have a feeling of unhappiness and think about the thought you just had and take it back to the thought before that until you get to the point where you discover what thought triggered the unhappiness. And that'll often lead you directly to the source of your addiction, the object of your addiction. And the next one is, jumped ahead. The next one is a good way to find out. This is another favorite one of mine, is analyze. Analyze your upset feelings. When you start feeling angry at someone at work or someone in your family, analyze where those feelings came from. And I like to use that coffee one again because it's really real for me. I was traveling with my husband and we were driving through Australia and I really got angry. I got so upset with him and it was all because he was an obstacle to me getting my coffee. So I thought I was angry at him when really I was angry at not being able to get my coffee when I wanted it. And it just caused a lot of problems and a lot of unhappiness because I thought that I needed the coffee to feel alert and awake and I blamed somebody else. So you can understand, when you understand the object of your addiction, you can address it. And that brings us to the philosophical addiction. And this philosophical addiction is the mother of all addictions. When we understand the philosophical addiction and what it is when we mistake where our world comes from. When we understand that we think our world is coming at us. The coffee is going to make me feel good. The alcohol is going to make me feel relaxed. The food is going to fill that void in me. When I think the world is coming at me instead of where the world is actually coming from, then I'm going to stay stuck in these addictions. But we are going to learn the system that's going to destroy the addictions. And when we have this understanding of the PIN thing, which Katie is going to teach us next, we'll understand exactly how we create our world around us and how we create the addictions that we have by misunderstanding which way the world comes from, how we create our world. And we're responsible not only for that and our addictions, but we can use the information Katie's going to give us to clean up our addictions when we understand how we create the PIN. Thank you very much.
All right, guess what? It's the pen thing again. So welcome to Dynamics Level 6, Peeling Off Our Addictions. So last week I was actually not here because I was at a talk by a NASA nuclear physicist, and he was saying that the number one way to learn something is through repetition. So that's why we're repeating the pen thing again, even though many of you have probably already heard it. But if you really want to integrate it into your person or who you are to really understand it and start using it, you have to hear it many times. Actually, they say in the ancient books you have to hear it 3,000 times, although that number switches because someone was like, oh, I finally heard the pen 3,000 times. They're like, oh, actually it's 7,000. So, you know, maybe some of you only have 2,995 more times to go before you understand it. So I'm gonna ask you guys for some audience participation, and I have a little bit of a cold right now, so I can't hear very well, so be sure you talk loud. All right, so first question. What is this thing?
A pen.
Good. Have you guys heard this before? Okay, so my dog, she's older, but she has amazing jaws. And so if I call her over, let's pretend Gracie is over here, and I call her over and I say, and I wave this thing in front of her, what is Gracie gonna do with it?
Chew it.
All right, she's gonna bite it. So now the human sees a pen and the dog sees a chew toy. So who's right?
Both.
Right. Because why is that? The human can write a letter with it or write a check to me with it, and the dog can chew it, no problem. By the way, Gracie ruined a dog toy of yours, Kelly. Anyway, so they're both right. Now we come to the most important idea of all. If I set this pen here, or this thing here on the table, and you know, Gracie leaves the room, all the dogs that are in the Himalayan kitchen leave the Himalayan kitchen, and all the people leave the room. The room is totally empty, totally quiet. No one's in the room. Now at that time, what does it become? A pen or a chew toy?
Both available.
Right, right. You can say neither, you can say available. So then, you know, let's say, because this is a likely scenario that I forget something. So I have to come back inside the dark, empty room. So I walk into the room, and I'm looking around because I forgot something, and my eye catches sight of this thing. Now at that moment, what does it become?
Pen.
Right, it becomes a pen. The minute I look at it, it becomes a pen. So can we say, let me ask you this, is the penness coming from the pen, or is the penness coming from me? Show me with your hand, we'll do some yoga. All right, right, the pen is coming from me. So, you know, if this pen is coming from me, from my mind, you know, does that mean I can make it into anything that I want? Maybe, you know, I was at a talk a while ago and they said if we collectively think together, we can start getting the things that we want. So if we all put our intention towards this turning into a big stack of $100 bills, so then we can go buy chocolate chip cookies. Like we could all split it. So maybe if we all try together, if we all wish really, really hard, we can get this to turn into some $100 bills. Let's try it. Okay, ready? Everybody thinking positively? $100 bills? Okay, wish, 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 wish. No, it's still a pen. I keep hoping it'll work. But that actually is what we do. We keep trying things to get what we want and wishing that they work without taking any action to ensure that they do. We keep trying to turn pens into diamonds or $100 bills. So the pen is coming from me, but not because I want it to. And that makes sense because I often want things and don't get them. And if I got them by wishing, I would have them. And so something else is going on here. So what's going on is the minute that I walk back into the room and my eye catches sight of this thing, well, what's really happening is in that moment, there's a seed that opens in my mind. And that seed, you know, we have to have these labels in order to understand things that aren't maybe easily understandable. So we use the label seed. So the mental seed cracks open, and out of it comes a small luminous image that's a perfect shape of what we would call a pen. You can think of it as a really fancy label. So this really fancy label comes out of your mind and it lays over this blue stick. And for me, this blue stick becomes a pen. Now, if a dog walked in, they would have a different seed that opens, and their label would be a chew toy. So now, whoops, how did these seeds get into my mind? Who put them there? Well, I did, by something I did, said, or thought, which I think it's interesting that even thinking plants seeds for things I'll experience later on. But it's not just pens that are coming from me. If only pens were coming from me, but it's actually, you know, the room around us, the person you like, the person you don't like, your dog, everything is coming out of seeds. So now we're going to talk about how you can use that in the context of addiction in order to plant seeds for the things that you want in your life.
And we're going to take a quick break in case you want to get more food. So if you wanna go get another round at the buffet, just leave your dirty plate on the table there.